Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I just want to do a quick mic check. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I just want to make sure we got that. Oh, no. Okay, unmute myself. Just a quick mic check if you can give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Um, cool. All right. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we're just going to get started here. I want to welcome everybody today and thank you for joining us. My name is Rick Marr, and I'm the with Turning Point Human Capital Management. And today we're going to talk about how more than 250 benefits brokers have protected and expanded their client relationships by leveraging strategic HR solutions through Turning Point Human Capital Management. This isn't just about adding services. It's about becoming an indispensable advisor to small business clients and those specifically that have an HR need but don't necessarily have a dedicated HR department. So over the next 30 minutes or so, 25 to 30 minutes, I'm going to share some insights and practical strategies that can help any benefits broker stand out in a crowded market, right? Deepen client trust, reduce that client churn, which in your field we all know is very difficult, and ultimately help grow your business. So we'll cover some key HR challenges small businesses face, how Turning Point's proven HR services solve those problems, and simple ways that you can introduce these solutions to your clients with minimal effort on your part. So I encourage you to think about your client conversations, right? How these ideas can shift the dynamic, right? Making you a go-to resource and not just a benefits broker. So, and then we'll wrap up with how you can take the next step to explore this, how this partnership can work for you. So before we dive in, let me just formally introduce myself. I'm the CEO and visionary of Turning Point Human Capital Management, and we're a fractional HR firm with one mission, right? And that's to release this pressure valve that builds in small business owners when the day-to-day HR issues popped up. We've worked with more than 2,500 businesses since I started this business in 2010, and that's been in over 49 different states and 65 different industries. So let's jump in here. Let me make sure I'm got my navigation down properly. Let me just check something. Cool, cool. So let's start by acknowledging the broker's reality, right? So as we all know, benefit brokers operate in one of the most competitive markets. There's always someone knocking on the doors of their clients, right? Your clients. And you're consistently and constantly working to prove your value in many ways to your clients. To make this more real, let me tell you about David, this broker we work with. So David, much like many of you, David had this solid book of small business clients. But like many brokers, he struggled with the challenge that his clients didn't have a dedicated HR department. These small business owners were juggling everything themselves, and often HR slipped through the cracks. So David, this broker that we work with, he found himself in a tough spot, right? He knew his clients needed more than just benefits. They needed guidance on things like employee handbooks and compliance updates and hiring practices and just any kind of overall HR support. But David didn't have the time or expertise to cover all these bases, right? His competitor was starting to pitch this bundled HR support services. And David can feel the pressure mounting, right? So the business he built and the book of business and those clients, like they were kind of under attack. So one client in particular came close to leaving because they felt vulnerable when a compliance issue arose. And David, realized that without an HR offering, he was at risk of losing trust with that client and ultimately potentially losing that business. So he was stuck between wanting to help and not knowing how to do it without turning his focus away from his core benefits package. So this is where many brokers find themselves operating in a tight competitive space with clients who definitely need broader support, but those clients are unsure how to fill this gap. In many instances, they go to their broker. All right. And if the broker doesn't have a resource, it could leave them a little vulnerable. So, the good news is, this gap is an opportunity. So brokers who find a smart, scalable way to offer HR solutions can use it to get a competitive edge, right? And this is what we found. Their clients stay longer. They rely on them on the broker more, which helps them get more business. And in that case, better retention, more lines of coverage, this means their business is growing. So understanding this dynamic is the foundation because when you see HR as a competitive advantage rather than a challenge, everything else in that client begins to align, right? And there's just more opportunities come up for other insurances, etc. So let's move on forward here. So so think of HR, or people ask often, they say, why is HR such a powerful secret weapon for benefits brokers? Let me tell you about another broker. We have this guy, Mike, and he was feeling squeezed by competition, and he was looking for a way to stand out. So Mike had a diverse roster of small business clients, right? But he noticed something troubling. Several were barely hanging on in their business, right? So juggling benefits with a confusing and offering often overwhelming set of HR challenges, Mike knew that those HR issues carried a real risk, right? Penalties for noncompliance, things like employee turnover, messy hiring practices, all these things could threaten his client's business, right? And ultimately put his own business at risk. So if they go out of business, he loses that client. So Mike initially thought, to himself, like, hey, I'm a benefits guy. HR is outside my wheelhouse, and I'm already stretched thin. So how can I add HR without burning out? So this may sound familiar to some of you. So here's where the secret weapon comes in. Instead of trying to tackle HR alone, Mike partnered with Turning Point Human Capital Management, and this changed everything for him. By introducing our HR services, things like living handbooks and law alerts and other services, Mike was able to offer a safety net that they desperately needed, right? Um, so this partnership didn't just add services, it changed Mike's role, right? So he went from being, and I say, quote, just a benefits broker to becoming a trusted advisor who solved real business problems. And clients started to see him as a go-to expert. So not only for benefits and other types of coverages, but for managing their workforce risks and boosting the employee's satisfaction and stability. So by having a dedicated HR partner that was handling complex, compliance and ongoing training issues, Mike avoided burnout, right? And which he feared. He was taking on, he didn't want to take on more work. He was leveraging the expert resources that made his business smarter and stronger, right? So his clients, what did they, you know, his clients, because obviously we were working with them and him, they felt the difference immediately. They finally had the confidence that their HR issues weren't slipping through the cracks, and that peace of mind translated into deeper loyalty and longer client relationships for Mike. So the other thing is they started referring other business owners that they knew to Mike. They were impressed by his comprehensive approach and they brought their friends to the table. So what Mike discovered is exactly why HR could be a broker's secret weapon, right? It multiplies your influence. It strengthens client trust and creates expansion opportunities without adding workload or risk for you, right? So it's moving from transactional relationships to transformational partnerships, right? If that makes sense. So transactional relationships to transformational partnerships. So, if think of the top brokers, right? This is what sets those brokers apart. They don't just sell benefits. They solve problems that keep their clients up at night, right? So HR support isn't an extra line item, right? It's a key to that broker becoming indispensable to that client and their book of business. So imagine for a moment what that kind of shift could mean for your business, for your book of business, for your clients, all that kind of stuff. What if what if anyone on this call could leverage expert HR resources to protect your clients, right, from the other brokers that are always calling on them, deepen trust, and open new doors. So all while not adding any more workload to you, right? Keeping that manageable. So that's what Turning Point offers, and that's what we're here to help you think about or potentially unlock if this makes sense for you or your client base. So, so some common challenge. So now that we've talked about why HR is such a powerful differentiator, let's dig deeper into real challenges your clients face every day, right? So these challenges create stress and uncertainty, and that's exactly where you can add tremendous value, right? If that owner's stressed out and they might just say, find a cheaper option for benefits, or what are we really paying for, or whatever it might be. So many small businesses, as most of you know, don't have a dedicated HR professional, right? The responsibility for HR either falls on the owner or some sort of manager or someone who's really not an HR person, but just is kind of handling it. And that person may already be stretched thin, trying to keep the operation running. And because of this, important HR tasks get postponed or handled inconsistently, which can lead to real risks, right? So, especially for small business, as we talked about earlier, if there's a risk in the business and it comes to fruition and they can't then afford to do things with you, then that's bad. So one of the biggest issues is the employee handbook, right? These handbooks are supposed to outline company policies and workplace expectations and compliance standards. But many small businesses have these outdated handbooks that they got from some other company or something. Or worse, they have none at all. So this leaves the employees at the firm unclear on policies, and this opens up that business to legal challenges. And the risk isn't just theoretical, it's real and mounting as labor laws evolve, right? So I'm sure you're pretty well aware the labor laws are constantly changing, and it's almost impossible from a federal and state to keep up with it. So, as I mentioned, the federal and state laws are they're shifting so much, it becomes almost a full-time job to keep track of these changes, let alone understand what they mean for day-to-day operations. And many businesses don't have the bandwidth or expertise to do this right, which puts them at risk for costly fines and lawsuits. The next one is kind of think about hiring and onboarding, right? Or also major pain points. Small business owners want to hire quickly to fill gaps, but without proper processes, they risk making, bad hires or miss critical compliance requirements. And again, this can result in things like high turnover or even legal exposure, which, again, we're going back to that business owner, your client, if they have problems, it could damage your business, right? Especially if they feel unsupported. So then there's other things like ongoing training risks and risk assessments that these things are often overlooked. But training keeps employees informed on policies and workplace expectations, think harassment training, which reduces risk, it can improve morale. And then things like risk assessments, they can identify the vulnerabilities and the issues before they escalate, whether it's related to compliance, workplace safety, or other HR factors, right? There's a million of them out there. So without regular training and audits, small businesses are flying blind, which is a recipe for surprise, problems, and stress. And all of these issues is not only cause that operational risk for your clients, but they can create anxiety and distraction, right? Small business owners want to focus on growing their business, right? Not handling some unexpected HR challenge. And this is really where Turning Point Human Capital Management steps in by offering these kinds of solutions. So, when you position yourself, and this is what Mike and Dave and other people that we work with, when they position themselves as the broker who solves these challenges for their clients, they're not just selling benefits, right? They in those cases, they were delivering peace of mind, security, and the kind of partnerships that clients really value for the long haul. So, think about the relief your clients may feel when they know these things are covered, or at least their broker has a way to help them out. So yeah, we're gonna switch slides here. So we've got a couple more slides. So, uh, you know, things now that I guess let me say this. So now that we understand, and I hope if you've ever felt these things, the HR challenges that small business owners face. So let's get into how Turning Point addresses those problems with a couple of proven solutions that help, brokers like yourselves add real and tangible value. But before I jump in, let me explain the four seemingly random numbers in the blue boxes. 2,500, that's expertise, right? We've worked with over 2,500 businesses across the country. This is what we're built to do. And those many of those 2,500 come from brokers like yourselves who are looking for a solution like this. So 65. So the number 65, we've worked in over 65 different industries, so we're industry agnostic. 49, we've worked in 49 of the 50 United States, so we're truly a national company. And experience, we started this business in 2010, so we're into our 17th year. I guess that's how I calculate it. So we've been doing this a while for a lot of different companies. So Turning Point's approach is designed not just to provide services, but to give brokers a strategic partner that really they can count on. So these solutions help brokers protect their existing client relationships and help create new opportunities by solving the problems that small business often face but can't handle on their own, right? So first up is just very quickly our HR Gold. So this is like our command center for HR management. This is a comprehensive platform. It centralizes your client's HR needs. It simplifies complex processes like employee record keeping and tracking and performance management. And for brokers, this is really where the rubber meets the road. Having your client have an HR goal means offering your clients an organized and scalable way to manage their workforce, their operations, and without the typical headaches. So it reduces the risk of compliance gaps and frees your clients to focus on their business growth, which means hopefully more employees, more people buying the health insurance and the disability and all those other kind of things. The next is the Living Handbook, which is really a game changer for small businesses. It's an essential thing, but it's often overlooked or outdated, and which could be a liability waiting to happen. So the Living Handbook is this dynamic tool that we use with almost all of our clients, and it provides them with this really strong compliance foundation that significantly lowers risk. And then, another cornerstone is kind of this HR risk assessment model that we built. So many small business owners, they know what they know. They know what they don't know. But what they don't know that they don't know is the thing that bites them, right? So our HR risk assessment proactively identifies compliance gaps and policy weaknesses and different vulnerabilities and all that sort of stuff. So to keep your clients informed and prepared, we've also built a system called Law Alerts. So these are federal and state, and anytime there's a change in the law, which practically is almost every day these days, we have the ability to rapidly alert you, the broker, the client, and make sure that client is up to date and up to speed. So it's really a great tool. And then finally, training, right? This is the foundation for building an informed workforce, compliant workforce. So we offer targeted training programs tailored to small businesses. And what I would say is, in the past couple of years, we've trained over 22,000 employees on sexual harassment, anti-sexual harassment training alone. So we're pretty good at it, and we know how to deliver it. We offer over 180 courses. So, what makes these solutions so powerful is how they work together, right? So we call it, HR Protect, to create this comprehensive safety net for your clients, from centralized management down to, policy updates in the handbook, proactive risk identification, ongoing legal awareness, and workforce training. We're really built to cover the full spectrum of needs. So for brokers, this means you have this turnkey set of resources that you can bring to your clients with confidence. So you're no longer limited to benefits alone, or you can be the advisor who proactively solves HR challenges. protects your clients from risk and strengthens relationships in ways competitors can't easily replicate, right? So unless you're one of those huge houses, that's very difficult to replicate. When you present these kinds of services that we're talking about as part of your client offering, in this case, Mike and Dave, those two brokers we talked about earlier, they demonstrated to their clients their commitment to the long-term success of their clients, and that helped them build loyalty, right? So, Turning Point, we're not just a service provider, but think of us as your strategic HR ally that makes your role bigger with your clients and your relationships stronger and deeper, which hopefully that can help you build your business even further. So let's look at next slide. So kind of to bring this all together, let me share a couple of real world examples of how brokers have transformed their client relationships by partnering with us. Um, One broker was facing client churn because her small business clients were struggling with these compliance issues, right? She was more focused on kind of, let's call it 20 and below, that kind of thing. And after introducing us in the assessments, she helped her clients uncover a couple of critical gaps that, if ignored, could have led to expensive penalties. This broker didn't save her clients. She just didn't save the clients from trouble. She positioned herself as a trusted advisor who goes beyond benefits, and it deepened that client loyalty. And I mentioned that a few times in the process. So another broker we work with that had some clients that were overwhelmed with just they had multi-state. So a client that had some multi-state offices, right? So there was all these states involved, cities and the federal government, of course, and they were getting overwhelmed with these ever-changing HR laws and policies. So in that instance, they introduced the Living Handbook and the law alerts, which automatically updated them on everything. And again, became this go-to resource for all things, and it resulted in longer retention and getting some referrals from their existing clients, which was really cool. So we also see some brokers who leverage Turning Point's training programs to create more engaged and compliant workforce. And one broker, she shared with us that her clients who incorporated kind of ongoing employee training noticed that in the company there was an improved morale and fewer conflicts, right? So there was, from a service standpoint, they weren't getting this in and out employees. Put them on the health plan, take them off the health plan, right? And 1 month there's 100 people, the next month there's 75 people, and all those things. So, these kinds of stories aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern we see across the board. Brokers who add comprehensive HR support, I'm going to tell you from our experience, they experience less client turnover, they generate more referrals, and they get increased revenue opportunities, right? There's no doubt about it. So the takeaway here is simple in my mind, right? HR services aren't just an add-on. They're an essential relationship builder and a risk mitigator that gives brokers a significant competitive advantage. So, when you partner with us, you're tapping into our proven systems, our experience, and all that kind of stuff. So, um, let's take a moment to go to the next slide here. So, let's understand a little bit of the psychology behind why offering HR support so effectively boosts retention, right? So, at the core, right, let's all just think about this simply. People crave two things when it comes to business relationships: trust and security. These are the emotional drivers deeply wired into how our brains work, right? So when clients feel their broker is looking out for them, not just selling them benefits or some coverage, but rather protecting them from risks, that client experiences a sense of relief and safety. And by providing this consistent HR support, it can trigger that feeling of security, right? So you become more than just a service provider. You become their guardian, who shields them from these costly mistakes, compliance violations, and really just the stress of managing all these regulations and stuff. So this emotional connection is powerful, right? And we've seen this in these examples that I was given of some of the brokers we work with. And for them, it created loyalty that isn't just logical, but felt that it was on a deeper level. So clients are less likely to even consider taking that phone call, of switching brokers when they have that trusted bond, right? They feel, in this case, again, going back to emotional, they feel trusted, understood, and cared for. That's it. So this is like this is like neuroscience, right? Like if any of you study neuroscience, right? Neuroscience tells us that familiarity and perceived similarity strengthens those bonds, right? They get me, they understand me. I like them, right? All those things because you're when you're looking out for them, it's an emotional thing. So when you provide tailored HR solutions that match your client's needs, again, the brokers that we use, what they signaled was they truly understand the client's unique challenges, right? And this was they were able to align their relationship with their clients and their internal values, concerns, and making it harder for that business owner to walk away from that relationship, right? So finally, you know, the ongoing nature of HR support creates this rhythm of positive interaction, right? There's regular updates through risk assessments and law alerts and training touch points and all that kind of stuff. So it keeps the relationship top of mind, which our brokers use that because they're the ones associated with bringing in, Turning Point Human Capital Management. So imagine the effect, and this is what these folks felt, of becoming the kind of advisor who didn't just stop by once, to drop off the renewal, right? That kind of thing. But the person that consistently delivers this peace of mind, right? Going back to that emotional. So that consistent positive engagement helps clients anchor themselves to the brokers that we work with. And it increases their resistance to the competitors' approaches, right? That's the whole thing. Don't let the other broker in the door in any way. So in short, trust and security, it could be built through strategic HR support, and it doesn't just keep the clients, right? It helps turn them into advocates who actually want to refer their friends to their brokers, right? So the psychological foundation is why adding HR services is one of the smartest moves, at least in the brokers that we have worked with, and I use as an example, that they use to protect and grow their business. So let's see here. We got a couple more slides. We're almost done. So um, let me just let me just so one of the things that comes up is how do I bring up HR support with my clients without making complicated or adding more work for myself? We talked about adding more work at the beginning. The whole goal is to not add more work for you, right? This is a common concern, and really the good news is it doesn't have to be hard, right? The keys The key to this is to keep the approach simple, focused on your client's needs, and framed as a value add, not an extra burden. So start your conversations. You guys are the best salespeople in the world. We know this. So, and you know this better than I do. Start your conversations by asking open-ended, thought-provoking questions, right? For example, try asking how confident that your current HR policies and practices are compliant and protected, right? Are you comfortable with your employee handbook? Is it up to date? Does it reflect the recent law changes? So, these kinds of questions, they plant this seed of awareness without sounding like the hard sell, right? They invite clients to consider whether they might be vulnerable in areas that they hadn't thought of before, or maybe they have thought of, but they didn't know to ask, right? So once you've opened the door to this topic, positioning Turning Point Services as a trusted partner ready to take on those tasks, it becomes easier, right? You can say something like, "We work with a trusted HR partner who specializes in these kinds of things," right? Whatever. You guys are the best salesperson. You know this. So it's important to emphasize that your clients won't need to increase their workload. You might add that the HR partner handles all this behind the scenes. So you get to focus on running your small business and servicing your customers and blah blah blah, right? So expect some common pushback, right? What do these folks say? Well, we don't have the budget for that, or we've managed so far without it. Be ready with kind of these kinds of responses. So, for example, explain how, again, I'm not trying to tell you your job. How proactive HR support saves money by preventing costly compliance, right? Investing in HR now minimizes risks. Well, you guys get it. So remember, the goal is to make HR support feel like a natural, strict. This is important. If they take nothing away, take this away. The goal is to make the HR support feel like a natural and strategic extension of your current offering, right? So that's what it's meant to be. This help to differentiate you from all the other brokers, but also those emotional things and those neuroscientific things we talked about earlier. So it's something that should strengthen your client relationships without complicating workflow. So we found when brokers frame it this way, the client feels more secure, appreciated, and supported, as we kind of mentioned earlier, right? And hopefully for you, and this would happen with some of our other brokers, it meant that they were moving from just being a benefits broker to becoming that indispensable trusted advisor. So the shift from transactional service provider to long-term partner, right, is really where that business growth for those brokers took place, where that client and that client loyalty can happen. So with that, I am now done. Um, but let me go to the final slide here. If you're curious about how this partnership can strengthen your client relationships, boost your competitive edge, let's talk. So I'm inviting you here to a discovery call. Just you have my email address. Let's just talk. I can walk you through some things specifically, how other brokers have used this, right? No pressure. It's just an opportunity to learn. And now I'll answer any questions. So with that said, it looks like, okay, I do have one question here so far. How do I introduce HR services to clients without overwhelming them? It's a good question. So I kind of mentioned this about a slide or two ago. Some open-ended questions, right? How confident are you in your HR policies? Um, you know, this opens the door gently, right? So then position HR solutions as a trusted partner, right? Part of your offerings. Emphasize the ease and peace of mind. Not going to set any extra work. But I would imagine there are many instances where one of your clients calls you and says, "Hey, I have this problem. Do you know what I should do?" Right? And they expect you to have the answer to the HR, right? So again, that would be another way, right? The second is, let me read this question. Let me make sure I understand it. Why should I invest in HR support if I have? Oh, okay. Uh, this is like the old auto insurance question. Like, why should I, why should I have auto insurance? I haven't gotten in an accident in a few years, right? So why should I invest in HR support if I haven't needed it till now? So, again, really good question. And I'd say many small businesses really manage without dedicated HR initially, right? And when a business starts, usually everyone has the same last name, right? So it's not that big of a problem. But as the business grows and HR laws change and compliance requirements are constantly evolving, investing in expert HR support can now help them avoid costly fines and legal issues and employee conflicts and all those sort of things. So I would almost say, like, think of this as an insurance, right? You're in the insurance business, right? Not only not only does it save headaches and expenses, um, but it does it before those problems arise, right? And in a strategic move, just like health insurance. If you go to the hospital with no health insurance, yeah, you didn't pay premiums for the last 12 months, but now you have a $4 million bill, right? It's that same kind of thing. So hopefully that explains it. Um, and then the final question. I'm not convinced that adding HR services won't mean more work for me and complexity. Great question. I think, you know, we haven't, I guess the answer would be, we've done this over 2,500 times, right? So, and really what I didn't mention earlier is we've gotten those 2,500 clients have come from over 4,000 referrals. And the 4,000 referrals would not come to us if they thought the concept was we were going to add more time and add more complexity to their world. The goal was to take away complexity, right, and to make the client more deeply indebted, I guess, to the broker, and so they could strengthen that relationship. So right now, these are just words, but I can assure you that this whole thing takes work off your client's hands, takes work off of your hands, and again helps you deepen those relationships, which you know lengthen the time they stay with you. Is if it's 3 years, can you get it to 4 years, right? If it's 100 employees, can you get it to 120 employees? If 80% of the people on the plan, can you get 90% of the people on the plan? That's the whole goal, and to make your job easier and all those sorts of things. So with that said, let me just see if there's any more questions. Um, that's our presentation. I think from a timing perspective, we're right about on it. You have my email address. Please, if there's questions, concerns, give a shout out. You want to talk about things, we can help in a lot of different ways. Again, I thank you for being here. Have a great day and chat soon. Take care.